I mean, that was, I think, the playbook for everyone. Is that, yeah, you pretend they don't exist. And if you ever bring them up, it's just to smear them. We're in a world now where that's just changed. Because like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are like some of the most you cannot overstate how valuable it is that these people who have millions of right-wing conservatives listening to them are preaching like a Ron Paulian non-interventionist. Like, this is just like an amazing thing.
So recently, Dave Smith had a discussion with Liberty Lockdown Clint Russell about the feud between Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson versus Nick Fuentes, how Israel and Israel policy figures into that, and who he thinks is right between the two groups in this feud, and does it matter? What's at the crux of it, and why are we paying attention to it? So let's get Dave's take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Nick Fuentes, I don't know if he's not, I wouldn't say he's our people, but he has been beefing hard with Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. Curious what your thoughts are.
Well, it's an interesting situation. I think that I thought it was great that Nick and Candace did their thing together. I thought it was an interesting interview. It was a little bit strange, the parts that were about me, or a little weird to listen to, but I guess some of my broader thoughts on it are like, I think that Candace and Tucker are my guys. I'm not saying a single bad thing about them. These guys have been great to me. I also think that they're very important figures right now. I didn't think it was wise or right the way they went at Fuentes on the episode that they did together. And I think that, like, look,
calling him a gay kid in his basement wasn't the best way to handle it, maybe.
Yeah, and look, we all know he is, but you still don't say that out loud. No, I'm just kidding. But
let's start the fight.
I'm genuinely just joking around.
Yeah.
I think that the way I look at it is like, in this game, I know I've had this happen a lot in my career, and so I can't like kind of blame Nick for this, especially being someone who's 15 years my junior or whatever. But I've had moments where someone will attack me and I feel like, well, I have to go back at you now. I can't just let you say that unanswered, like, especially when it's like a personal attack or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, all fair statements from Dave so far. I think charitable to both sides in this whole thing. There's no question that Tucker and Candace's stance on Israel are very important for the dissident, anti-Zionist people among us and the cause that we want to kind of pursue to lessen Israeli influence in our government, be less Israel first in our foreign policy. And that's true too. And at the same time, I also think it's fair to say, hey, Candace and Tucker weren't right to just call him a gay kid in his basement. I mean, that's an ad hominem that didn't really belong in the conversation and isn't really relevant. Even if that was true, it was, an insult, and it doesn't really answer, the questions people want answered about this. And look, I mean, for Nick to lash out at them too afterward, I think was unfair to some extent too. But I'm with Dave so far on this.
I flipped out on Dave Rubin recently, just because Dave Rubin's out there saying I'm a moron and I don't know what I'm talking about. So what can I do other than go, why don't me and you sit down and we'll see who doesn't know what they're talking about? Dave Rubin, of all people. Now, this is a different situation than that, but so I understand where Nick felt like he had to pull the knife out, because that's his brand. That's what he does.
Yeah.
Like if you're Mike Tyson in his prime, you're like, well, if you come throwing, you want a slugfest, okay. I'm the slugfest guy,
right.
And that's what Nick is.
Candace is basically the same thing, though.
In a lot of ways,
yeah.
Sure. I do think that, if you do really care about these issues, like say, if Nick Fuentes is like the Christian who really cares about, kind of Israeli dominance over American policy, well, then you also got to think to yourself, hey, what are you doing here, man? Because like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are like some of the most you cannot overstate how valuable it is that these people who have millions of right-wing conservatives listening to them are preaching like a Ron Paulian non-interventionist. Like, this is just like an amazing thing.
It sure is. I mean, no one's moved the Overton window on the Israel issue more than those two, by the way. So if your goal is to have people question or, go beyond questioning and outright oppose Israeli influence in government, like AIPAC influence and the America First mentality, aid toward Israel, which those two have been talking about for some time now. I know it doesn't go as far back as maybe Nick would like, or as far back as, say, Ron Paul or Pat Buchanan. There was always someone before all of us that found the correct path here and being a dissident opposed to that kind of foreign policy. But at some point, if it's your goal to kind of pursue that route and get as many people on board such that there are tangible political or cultural changes in that regard, you'd think that you wouldn't bash them about that issue. And I can see if, Nick had reservations with them, or Tucker and Candace had reservations with Nick regarding like economic policy and they butt heads on that. But for it to be about Israel, it seems like they're mostly on the side of non-intervention, and they might have slightly different reasons for it. In fact, I'm sure they do. But at some point, it would seem to be valuable to at least align on that and acknowledge the worth that each of the two sides bring, regardless of which party here.
And so I think one of the things that people resent or don't like about the Groypers in general is that they feel like, you guys become this stain on all the rest of us. And you see this with, when Jordan Peterson goes on Joe Rogan and the topic of conversation is my debate with Douglas Murray. And what does Jordan Peterson go to right away? Well, there's these Groypers. Yeah. There's these anti-Semites online. Because what's frustrating is that from our perspective, like from Nick's perspective, I'm a limited hangout type of, because I won't go far enough to actually deny the Holocaust or blame the Jews. I'll just talk about the clean break strategy or whatever.
And what's a limited hangout anyways? Would he have reservations with then how Sachs and Greenwald and Mate and Blumenthal talk about this too? I guess he would. But, it's so absurd when even you get, good Israel last dissidents that don't want an Israel first policy and criticize it. Some of the most compelling opponents of this are Jewish. Norm Finkelstein, too, in addition to all the other names I talked about. But I just think it's kind of retarded if that's a limited hangout. If that's a limited hangout, we could do a lot worse, like the neocons, who it doesn't seem like Nick drags as much as really good people like on the Israel issue, like Dave Smith and Jackson Hinkle.
But from our perspective, you guys are just an albatross around our neck that just gives them the low. It's like, so you see these guys, they got nothing they can really say about me, but they can pivot to Nick and start talking about they do the same thing with you with Daryl Cooper. Yeah, sure. And so I don't know. I think the way I look at it in the broader sense is I think whether it's me or Daryl Cooper or Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes or any of them, all of us have had people essentially trying to cancel us, trying to smear us, trying to, attack our character without taking on any of our arguments. I think we're kind of in a new phase where cancel culture isn't working, at least at the moment. And you know what? However you feel about Nick Fuentes, same way, however you feel about me, I'm here. So if you want to take on what I'm saying, then you got to take on what I'm saying.
And that's another charitable point of view toward Nick here, is that if Tucker's going to say those things like that, maybe he should debate Nick. Maybe he should have him on and find out where their differences are. I'm not absolving either side of wrongdoing here. All I can say is that Tucker has challenged some of the worst narratives that the neocons and Zionists have thrown at us on foreign policy on virtually every show he does, or maybe that's an overstatement. Maybe it's like 2/3 or 3/4 of his shows. Whether, in comparison, I take a look over at Rumble on Nick's shows, and he has, several multi-episode series on why this Israel critic isn't properly criticizing Israel. And the content output is glaring. Like, that difference is striking. I mean, I know who's moved the needle further, and it is people like Candace and Tucker. I mean, regardless of however wrong they were about going low beyond the belt, but I do think there is some semblance and truth in saying, hey, he attacks a lot of good critics of Israel too. And, the dynamics that Dave mentioned are apparent as well.
So I do think that, I think at a certain point, Nick has earned the fact that he's not going anywhere. He's been canceled by everyone, and he's bigger than ever. Yep. So if that's the case, then I think in a way that has to be incorporated then.
You may not like this, or you may totally get what I'm about to say, but I feel like you and Nick are actually in a very similar position in that you're both saying things that are kind of third rail, or at least they had been historically. You both are having kind of hit pieces and smear jobs that are being pushed against you, and you're both kind of vaunted debate opponents that if you disagree, neither of you are going to run away, and also you're ducked a lot. Like Nick is kind of Voldemort in the same way that you are. I remember Shapiro for years wouldn't say your name.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like now, I think Fuentes was in that mold too, and now both of you guys are of such prominence that it basically requires people to say you by name.
Yeah, no, there's an interesting parallel there for sure, where like that we both, I mean, but it's not just us two, right? I mean, we're both representatives in our own way of the kind of non-interventionist right, maybe him being the identitarian non-interventionist right, and me being the like liberty-oriented non-interventionist right. But I mean, that was, I think, the playbook for everyone. You know, is that, yeah, you pretend they don't exist, and if you ever bring them up, it's just to smear them. We're in a world now where that's just changed.
It has, and it's changed even toward Fuentes. You know, I've said my piece on this, but that is true. He can't really be ignored. He has a ton of followers, a ton of people taking his side on these things. But to me, the proper side is the side of liberty and the side of non-interventionism, not on the side of, you know, spilling so much time and effort on this feud in particular. I am willing to talk about this feud for at least a few videos, because I think it's important to say that I wish these sides were aligned, if not on anything else, if on Israel, and not to attack each other, if all three of these people involved are moving the needle in the right direction. I think Dave generally feels that way too, but I don't think it's right to just say, you know, it's all about the Jews when, you know, half of my program is covering and reacting to very good Jewish critics of Israel. I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it was fair for Tucker to, you know, land the gay kid in the basement low blow, even if that's true. And even if Nick is gay, and I don't think it's actually clear based upon what I've seen, whether or not he is, I don't think he's, you know, actually revealed that, it would still be a low blow.
You know, like however you feel about Andrew Tate, he's here. Like you got to either take it on or not. Like if you want to ignore it and just pretend it doesn't exist and move on, fine.
Right.
But the drive by, like I would feel, right, there are people who I don't want to sit down and debate for different reasons. You know, there are some people because they're
Tom
just,
Woods.
Tom, it's just easy work. I love his family. I don't want to do that to them. No, but there are people, right? There are people who they don't have a high enough profile. There's libertarians. I saw some of them today on Twitter. Some of the, you know, libertarian theory bros who are furious that I won't sit down and debate with them. I just don't find it interesting enough or valuable enough a use of my time to debate whether, you know, to debate Zulu on whether homeless people taking a shit in the park are heroes. Like I'm
Yeah, nor should he if they're, you know, a 50 follower type individual. You know, that would just be like going beneath Dave and what he's capable of, the type of prominence of people that could be in debates with Dave. So I don't really blame him on that. But again, he's right. In the past, you know, what was it? You know, 20 years ago, they ignored Ron Paul, even though Ron Paul was changing minds in 2008. That was the Ron Paul revolution. Hey, it was a niche group of people, but it sure seemed to throw a wrench in the plans of the Republican establishment, so much so that they had to change the rules to make sure he didn't get the proper delegates that he had earned via the primaries, etc. And that's what is being done to some extent with Nick. So I sympathize with Nick's followers in that regard, but at the same time, you have to agree that the correct stance is non-interventionism. And if you get to that route of favoring non-interventionism in Israel and in foreign policy in general, getting us out of these stupid, senseless, backward, bloody, murderous wars, then how you get to that point is less material than if you get to that point. And that's the mentality that people like Harry Brown and Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul embrace. But I don't really see that mentality from Fuentes. I'll just be honest about it.
not interested in that. And I understand why that's frustrating to him, but like, you know, that's life. And there's other people who I probably have big numbers, maybe would do, but I just have so little respect for them, or I just find their whole thing to be gross. So I don't really, But if I go on Joe Rogan and I start trashing a person by name, I feel like I have to be willing to sit down and debate that person.
There's an obligation there.
So if Jordan Peterson's going to do that, then that should be followed up with like sit down with, and why is it like, even the other day, again, someone who's been very good to me personally, who I appreciate that. Charlie Kirk, I'm talking about. He took a lot of heat for hosting me at that thing.
Yeah.
And he didn't buckle on that. So I respect that. But when he said the thing again, he got a caller the other day. I don't know if you saw this, asking about Nick Fuentes. This video has gone viral. And he's like, I don't debate trolls. And you're like, dude, you debate Maoists and pro-abortion people. You debate. So how do you sit here and say
he made his career demolishing those?
Yes,
people.
you debate the worst of the worst. Yet here's a kid who, on the right wing, got a big enough audience that you're getting asked questions about him all the time, and your argument is going to be, no, that's beyond the pale.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I just find that, I don't know how you justify that from a right-wing position. From a left-wing worldview, I can understand how you... I can't platform that. The Maoist is misguided, but the right-wing racialist is evil.
Right.
I just don't know how that plays in a not woke progressive space.
Yeah, that's right. It's better to take the arguments on, and I just don't think certain people can be ignored, especially those of a particular prominence. And Nick has grown into accumulating a lot of audience. He does have a lot of prominence now in right-wing dissident circles. And, part of me actually looks at this and wants to say, why is everyone taking a side in this? Again, because of what I've laid out, I think the stance against supporting Israel at all costs is much more important than the particulars of the feud and who, started it, who was anti-Israel first, and all those different classifications. Is Tucker really, a CIA? Did he really know his dad was CIA? All those questions really just don't matter to me. What matters is how far that you are moving the needle toward a brighter future where people open their eyes to these atrocities and the genocide in Gaza, the Israel first mentality that's pervasive in our political system. That seems more important. And then part of me is also like, hey, it's almost as if the Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson corner is totally in cahoots with Nick Fuentes over this. Because what would rise all three of them to greater prominence than having the whole political world talk about them for about, what has it been, more than a week now about this for the most part. So that they're both getting so much discussion here raises all of their profiles. So maybe I'm wrong, and it's not that this is, causing a destructive thing for people that hate Israel or, oppose Israel or don't, support Israel, especially in specific regards, the war in Iran, the genocide in Gaza, etc. So maybe it's actually, another layer of 4D chess above how I'm thinking about it. And they're all in on this together, raising each other's profiles. And people are talking about Israel in relation to it by proxy. Maybe that's a good thing. But what do you think? Let me know down below. Do you agree with Dave on this? Do you think his points were well made here? Do you believe that the issue itself is more important than the particulars of this particular feud? Let me know in the comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Liberty Lockdown too. He's awesome. I was actually at this event, Ron Paul's 90th birthday, and I talked to all three of those guys that were on stage at various points during the day, but I didn't get to see this live, but that was an awesome event. Long live Ron Paul, man. Also, please consider becoming a member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all my videos that are members only before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out. Have a good one, guys. See you in the next one.